Hi, I'm Howard Thau. I'm the owner of Sonic Packaging. I spent the last 35 years selling and managing custom contract manufacturing and custom contract packaging projects. We specialize in highly regulated custom manufacturing packaging programs covering the pharmaceutical, the medical device, and the diagnostic industries. Sustainable packaging is a great category that many marketing and packaging companies are playing in, although there is a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to sustainable packaging. And I believe that's probably the largest challenge for the industry as a whole, is really narrowing down exactly what is sustainable packaging, how best it can be managed, and what claims our customers can use. Often we get inquiries from our customers, large and small, looking for what they consider a sustainable package. And typically our first question is, what is sustainable packaging and how best can they use it and how best can it help our environment? Usually the first question is it biodegradable? And then is it compostable? And last but not least, is it recyclable? And those categories are very clear when it comes to what can be packaged and what can be properly contained within each of those packages or those packaging styles. In most cases today, we're packaging utilizing a recyclable material, and that will allow our customers and their products to be properly protected, through their logistics and their supply chain, but also for its shelf life when it comes to the package and product itself. There are a wide variety of packages that fall under that sustainable category. Unfortunately, not all of them can be utilized, as I mentioned, based on certain products that can be contained in them. The largest category today is really recyclable materials. Typically, those materials are made from a monolayer or a single layer of materials, allowing the consumer to then place the materials into a recycling bin or take it to a center to have it properly be recycled and be reused in another format. The second category, I think, as you mentioned, was a compostable. And compostable materials have a variety of different structures that will make up that specific type of category. The challenge is how many municipalities and how many communities have the proper way to compost a material or a package. And so although in Europe and in Canada, there seems to be a lot more opportunity from a compostable standpoint, in the United States, there's not a lot of communities that have compost piles and the ability to actually take those materials back and properly compost them. So in those categories of compostable versus recyclable tends to have a lot wider range of applications just based on the ability to take these materials and then properly handle them and repurpose them in a later stage. I think, people talk today about sustainability, recyclability, composting, and so forth. This is not a new trend. If I recall, going back well over 25 years ago, there was a trend that went to basically source reduction. And basically they went away from large rigid containers to basically flexible packaging that basically would take up less room in the landfills. So things have changed greatly in the last 25 years with how materials are being handled, how they're being recycled and composted as well. So, people today are really focusing on this because that's a big part of their mission. And I think it's wonderful that our country and our different communities are focused on the environment and the future for our children and our grandchildren. But it is not a new term and it's not a new technology. I think that the vision for it has changed greatly, going from source reduction, just reducing the total amount of package or the space these packages take up, And secondly is looking at what alternatives can be used in conjunction with that. And I think today where a big part of it is companies, customers are looking at it saying, how do we reduce the total volume of packages? How do we remove secondary and tertiary packaging from their primary package just to avoid waste? And I think that's probably the largest difference today than it was 25 years ago, is getting rid of additional stages of packaging that will allow us to basically save from the first start of making the package. Secondly is what's going to happen to the package on the later stages. I think it's a major trend, and it's a trend in all industries that we service. So I would guess probably between a third and 50% of the inquiries that come to us, the sustainable discussion is on the table. Of course, we really need to drill down a little further than that and really look at the product. Because if you don't have a stable format that will allow you from the packaging services all the way through the logistics and getting it to the consumer or the medical professional based on how it's being used, ideally the packaging is on people's mind, but in many cases there's not a current packaging format that would allow our customers to safely and correctly have their package or their product packaged, and then have it go through the typical supply chain challenges. You know what? It's a challenge for the packaging industry as a whole. When we look at the different materials and looking at the products, whether the product is a liquid, a powder, or a solid or semi-solid, and also how the product is being used, as well as how it's being distributed, logistics, supply chain challenges along the way. So for us, we really look at, one, what is the product? What are the ingredients that comprise the product? How it will be used to determine what is the correct material that we can utilize. Is it a material that is compostable? Is it a recyclable material? Is it potentially a water-soluble or biodegradable material that can also be used? So we really look at it from a holistic approach and trying to understand, what and how is this product being used? And then secondly is, what are the correct, proper materials that we can use in order to achieve those goals. Each of the industries, of course, has preferred materials. They have preferred visual cues on those different packages. So when you look at the pharmaceutical industry, of course they're looking at from a protection standpoint. In some cases they're looking from a child resistance standpoint, and also how that product is being used. So ideally your pharmaceutical companies will look very differently than your cosmetic companies that go from very sexy, very eye-appealing looking packages, and in some cases they go to a little bit of the clinical when you look at some of the treatment products. Your food companies, of course, is a totally different story when it comes to the graphics and how it's going to look, whether it's direct to consumer or whether it's something that's more on a retail shelf. So I think each of the industries you have to take individually and truly understand, how's the product going to be marketed, how's it going to be distributed, to determine what are the best materials, and of course what are those best options when it comes to sustainable claims. I believe the two main things is we start off with, can it properly be contained for the shelf life of the product and through supply chain logistics? Number one. Number two is the price, because in many cases, if the product is a cost-sensitive item, then the price point becomes a challenge, because everyone feels, well, if it's a recycled material or recyclable material, it should be less expensive. In many cases, it's more expensive. The minimums are higher as well. So that, cost is definitely a driving point. And I believe that as materials become less expensive from a recyclable, compostable, and or biodegradable standpoint, I think there'll be a more common acceptance in the marketplace. Today, I think that a lot of brands would love to have a more sustainable option, yet based on the margin pressures, that they're not able to actually achieve those goals. When you look at materials that have a recycled content in there, in that cost, they have to go and reclaim those materials, reprocess them, and put a percentage of that into the new materials. So you have the transportation, you have the collection of it, and the reprocessing. And so that tends to have a lot higher cost than if you were to use a virgin plastic that basically goes from that kind of pellet or that raw form into the finished product. So just when you look at a recycled material, it tends to be a lot more expensive. When you look at materials that have recyclable capabilities, again, it comes down to the cost of the materials. The processing in many of those cases is more expensive. And then, of course, they're also not produced in the same volume or quantities that a current virgin material may be used that is not considered recyclable. And so you have to look at from a scale standpoint, you have to look at availability of those raw materials and also the processing speed of them. Well, yeah, there are customers and people that believe that any type of plastic is bad material, and so that it would not fall under a quote-unquote sustainable option. Although we do have monolayer materials that are certified recyclable. So I let the statistics and the data show for themselves. We're not in a position to say that plastic is good, plastic is bad, paperboard, combination materials, glass. So each material has their own positives and negatives. And for some customers, no matter what the product is or package is, if it has plastic in it, it's something that they don't want in their product line. And I respect that. But that does not mean that all plastic is bad. That does not mean that all materials that have a plastic component are bad. It just means that it may not fit based on their sustainable vision for their product line. Well, glass, of course, has a great barrier property. Glass, of course, as it is, has a visual or value play as well. So glass will always have a place in the market. Yet the challenge that you have for glass, I think, as you mentioned, is the weight. Okay, so when you look at the weight of the glass, you're also looking at the cost of freight. The freight of the glass coming into the factories to be filled, the cost of the glass or filled product to then go through distribution. At the same time, you're dealing with breakage, so you need to look at to potentially to have additional packaging in your process to protect the glass through the logistical part of the process. So, you need to look at, what additional packaging is required because of glass. You have to look at your freight costs that are also a limiting factor when it comes to glass. So there's no question that people love glass from its clean look. They like it from its value, and they like it from its recyclability standpoint. But cost ends up being a factor in many cases that can't be overcome. I think that the biggest misconception, or one of them, not necessarily the biggest, but one of the misconceptions is that if you have a material that has a percentage of recycled content in it, that it really makes it sustainable. Well, is it more sustainable than a package that has no recycled content? Of course, okay? But that does not mean that package is necessarily good for the environment. Because if you have a package that has 4, 5, 6 layers of material, because one of those layers has a recycled content, I don't believe that really makes it a environmentally friendly package, because you still have those other 5 or 6 layers. The package is not recyclable, it is not compostable, it is not biodegradable. So yes, you are helping out in a small way by having one of those layers in the package having a recycled content, but I don't believe that you're really achieving the total goal of having an environmentally friendly package. So Sonic's view, in sustainable packaging, it has been a very long-term view. So we really started on this well before, sustainable packaging came into the news every day of our lives. And looking at, as I mentioned, going back over 25 years ago when we were working on source reduction packaging. So today, I believe that, with the innovation on the materials, and Sonic's role really is working with the material suppliers, working with the converters of the materials, as well as the filling operations that actually allow us to offer our customers a turnkey solution. So we really look at, from a holistic approach, exactly where the market is going, what are the materials that are available, and also what materials will our customers' products be successful with, based on that lifespan of the product. As I mentioned earlier, that there's not one material that works for all applications. What works for powders may not work for liquids. What may work for some liquids may not work for others that have solvents and others. So you really have to look at it on a per project basis, on a per package basis, to really determine what is the ideal format for our customers and for their products. Today, I believe the number one package that our customers are really looking for is a recyclable package. And we're able to do that on a liquid standpoint as well as a powder or dry standpoint, that we have materials that are certified here in the United States, basically to be fully recyclable. Everything from a stand-up spouted pouch all the way through a single-dose sachet, and even looking at monolayer injection molded tubes and ampules. So we really offer our customers a wide array of packaging options that are fully recyclable. Although we do have compostable materials, our customers are saying that at this point, they'd like to have something that could be quickly used today, something that they could get the benefit of a good barrier material, but also something that can be commercially recycled. Since most of the municipalities do not have a compost section today, our customers, large and small, are really focusing more on what is available from a recyclability standpoint. Many of our materials today also have a percentage of a post-consumer regrind, or a PCR, that allows those materials, at least some of the layers of those materials, to contain a material that's been reprocessed. So the combination of using either a virgin material, a material that can be recycled, or has actually a percentage of the recycled content, allows our customers to really, basically follow through on their mission of having a more sustainable future. I think that in the future there'll be more and more opportunities to convert current packaging formats to sustainable options. I don't know, based on certain materials, based on certain shelf lives and the sensitivity of those materials, whether everything can go into a sustainable packaging option. When we look back 5 years or 10 years ago, we've come a very long way in a very short period of time. So in 5 years or 10 years from now, I believe we'll be a lot further along. I don't know if we'll have a 100% sustainable future, but I think every step is a positive step, and we're going to continue working hard to convert as many of the current formats to a more sustainable option. I think the first question, and I believe we have a system called the Sonic Way, which is a free Sonic session where we meet with the customer either online or in person and kind of go over the specifics of the program. So the first question really is what is the product? Does the product have certain characteristics? Is it temperature sensitive? Is it light sensitive? Is it moisture sensitive? In order to understand more about the barrier properties, but also to understand from a handling and the specific environment where the packaging line would be situated. So once we establish what the product is, any specific handling requirements, we then look at what is the dosage form. We also look at how is the product being used. Is it a single use? Is it a multi-use? Is it something that they're actually pouring into another container, or is it something that something's being mixed into that container? So really looking at what is the product, How is it being used? How is it being transported from a logistical standpoint? Here's the question: does it need any additional protective barriers, from a material standpoint and or just from a cushioning standpoint, to ensure that it gets to, whether it's going to a medical facility, whether it's going to consumer or going to a retail format?